I'm Ellis Martin. This is Money Talk Radio and the Ellis Martin Report. This segment is sponsored by Great Northern Minerals, trading on the ASX as GNM and in the U.S. on the OTC as GNMRF. Today we're going deep. Way deeper than the headlines, deeper than the quick sound bites, deeper than the typical surface level talk about rare earths, critical minerals, or geopolitical supply chains. We're going into the Mojave Desert, into a forgotten chapter of American industrial dominance, into the full and attempted rebirth of a sector of the United States once controlled completely and then lost. We're talking about Mountain Pass, one of the most important and misunderstood mining districts in the Western Hemisphere. And we're talking about antimony, a critical mineral that most Americans have never heard of, but cannot live without. And we're talking about Great Northern Minerals, a company operating both in Australia and in the Mountain Pass district of the Mojave Desert in California, literally positioned inside the same geological system where the modern rare earth industry was born. So let's begin the journey. The Mojave Desert, the unlikely cradle of modern technology. Most people look at the Mojave Desert and see emptiness. I see the birthplace of half the modern world. Stretching across southeastern California, the Mojave has always been a land of extremes. Blistering heat, cold nights, endless silence, and the incredible sense of geological time pressing in on you. But beneath that surface exists some of the richest and most strategically important mineralization on Earth. Not gold, not silver, not copper, but a set of elements the periodic table never expected to matter. The rare earth elements: lanthanum, cerium, neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, terbium. Names that sound like they belong in a science fiction novel. But if you're listening to this show using a phone, or driving a hybrid car, or sitting next to a refrigerator like I am, with a modern compressor motor, rare earths are touching your life in at least half a dozen ways. And the place that birthed this modern miracle, not Silicon Valley, not Washington, not Beijing. It was Mountain Pass, a lonely ridge in the Mojave Desert. The accident that changed everything. Mountain Pass was discovered in the 1940s when prospectors' Geiger counters started spiking. At first they thought they were striking uranium, but what they actually found was a carbonatite-hosted rare earth deposit, one of the richest ever discovered. Those samples eventually reached the hands of scientists working with General Motors, and suddenly an obscure set of elements became the foundation of the next generation of magnets, phosphors, and precision technologies. This is one of the greatest untold stories in American industrial history, how a dusty patch of desert quietly became the global source of rare earths for decades. By the 1960s and 70s, Mountain Pass was supplying over 60% of the world's rare earths, with the remaining production scattered across small, inconsistent operations globally. Every color TV? Mountain Pass. Every early catalytic converter? Mountain Pass. Every early computer component? Mountain Pass. This was America at the center of a supply chain we didn't even realize was strategic because we hadn't yet imagined the world these elements would make possible. The golden era, and the shift nobody saw coming. For decades, Mountain Pass thrived. Molycorp ran a sophisticated operation producing high-purity rare earth oxides, refining them on-site and selling them globally. At this point, the United States was so dominant that rare earths weren't even considered critical. Why would they be? We owned the mine. We controlled the chemistry. We had the production. We had the patents. Then slowly, quietly, things began to shift. China started opening its mineral economy. It began subsidizing state-backed mining. It started dumping rare earths at prices nobody else could compete with. And while China ramped up production, the U.S. was tightening regulatory screws on operations like Mountain Pass. The result? America walked away from the industry it created. We didn't lose rare earths. We surrendered them without realizing the cost. The 1990s, the great treasure of technology. In the 1990s, two things happened. One, a series of wastewater spills at Mountain Pass caused regulatory shutdowns and spiraling compliance costs. Two, China aggressively scaled up production, offering rare earths at prices that made it uneconomic for Molycorp to compete. And then came the real turning point. The United States allowed rare earth magnet manufacturing technology to be sold to Chinese companies. This wasn't espionage. This wasn't theft. It was a business deal, one the U.S. thought was inconsequential. But it wasn't. It was the moment China acquired not just rare earth ore, but the ability to process, refine, and manufacture magnets. The real value add. As China built out its vertically integrated rare earth machine, Mountain Pass fell into bankruptcy. into disrepair, and eventually into folklore. The 2010 crisis and a rude awakening. Then in 2010, China restricted rare earth exports over a territorial dispute with Japan. Prices exploded. The world panicked. Washington woke up. Suddenly, everyone realized the same truth. If you don't control your critical minerals, you don't control your future. That crisis spurred a short-lived revival of Mountain Pass under the 2010s era Molycorp, which raised billions, rebuilt the mine, and attempted to reignite American production. But the company was too early, too leveraged, and too dependent on a price spike that didn't last. Molycorp collapsed again. China regained dominance. And the story repeated. Today, MP Materials operates Mountain Pass, but refining still relies heavily on Chinese processing. The U.S. is trying to catch up, but the gap is enormous. Antimony, the unsung strategic metal. Now let's talk about antimony. Because if rare earths are the materials of modern technology, antimony is the material of modern survival. Antimony is essential for ammunition primers, artillery, flame retardants, semiconductors, grid-scale energy storage, and ally hardening for mission-critical military applications. The U.S. Geological Survey ranks it as one of the highest-risk minerals for the United States due to foreign dependence. And who controls global supply? China and Russia. This is why companies with antimony resources, especially those in safe jurisdictions, are getting government attention. That's why the DoD and the DOE are funding antimony initiatives. And that's why regions like the Mojave, with historic antimony and rare earth mineralization, are suddenly back in the spotlight. Enter Great Northern Minerals, a rare positioning. GNM is unique. 1. They have antimony gold assets in North Queensland. 2. They have the Catalyst Ridge project, 214 lode claims covering 18 square kilometers directly located within the Mountain Pass district. Catalyst Ridge sits in the same geological system that produced Mountain Pass, a rare carbonatite intrusive complex. GNM's ground shows rare earth enrichment, antimony occurrences, structural features consistent with mineral transport, and proximity to historical production. From an exploration standpoint, that is gold. From a geopolitical standpoint, that is platinum. The big picture, rare earths are essential. Antimony is essential. The Mojave is back in focus. The U.S. is rebuilding supply chains. China still dominates. The stakes are massive. Companies like Great Northern Minerals sit right in the crosshairs of those global forces. They are not just explorers. They are part of the conversation that determines whether America regains control over the minerals that shape its technological, economic, and military future. This segment has been sponsored by Great Northern Minerals, trading on the ASX as GNM and in the U.S. on the OTC as GNMRF. For Money Talk Radio and the Ellis Martin Report, I'm Ellis Martin.